Welcome back to From Heart to Heart. Today our episode is aortic dissection. We'd like to introduce once more Dr. Ibrahim, who is a cardiac surgeon and educates us during our show. Hello, Doctor.
Hello, Mireille.
Doctor, what is aortic dissection?
It is a condition in which the blood finds a tear in the inner lining of the aorta and get into this tear and dissects its way through the wall of the aorta.
So basically makes another tube of blood in the main one.
A false one. So basically you'll end up having two lumens in the aorta. One is false and one is true. So we call it a double-barreled aorta.
Okay, Doctor. Let's watch a video for aortic dissection.
In the first video you will see now the aorta, and the aorta is composed of the root, that is the very first part, and then the ascending part, and then the arch, and then the descending part, and then the abdominal part, that is the part which runs in the belly. As you know, the aorta is the big artery that carries blood to the different parts of the body. And now we are seeing a close-up, and we are seeing the aorta from the inside. We see the opening of the left coronary artery and the right coronary artery. And we see the ascending aorta. It's well illustrated. And now if we take a cross-section, we'll see that the aortic wall is divided into inner layer, that is the lining, middle layer, and outer layer. And you see the blood now is going from the left ventricle through the aortic valve into the ascending aorta, and then into the different branches, including here the right and left coronary arteries to supply the heart. And now you see a tear in the aorta, and then you will see that the blood will be going into the normal lumen and into the false lumen, and by pushing its way through the false lumen, it can encroach on the origin of the left coronary artery, and that can reduce the blood supply to the area of the heart supplied by the left coronary artery, and that can induce a myocardial infarction or a heart attack too. And you could see now the false lumen to the right hand side. It's just a section through the aorta, and the true lumen to the left hand side. And this is a cross section again, and that shows the false lumen in blue and the true lumen in red. And this process can involve the whole aorta. Now we saw it in the ascending aorta, the arch of the aorta, then the descending part of the aorta, and it goes all the way into the abdominal aorta, that is a part of the aorta in the belly, and it goes all the way down to the legs too.
So is aortic dissection just a tear, or is there other complications for it?
Absolutely. We saw one complication in that first video. We saw that the blood being in the false lumen can push hard on the takeoff of the branches that supply blood to other organs, and we saw that in the first video, that the false lumen was encroaching on the origin of the left coronary artery, and that, as I said, can induce a heart attack. Yeah. However, we'll watch another video now that will show us in more details other complications that can happen. In this video you can see again, here is the aorta, and a cross section in the aorta shows the three layers of the wall of the aorta, and you will see that for this to happen, you have to have an underlying weakness in the aortic wall, like an atherosclerosis or Marfan syndrome. That's basically weakness in the wall of the artery. And you will see that there is a tear, and this tear leads to the blood pushing into the false lumen, and you see both in cross section and in longitudinal section how the false and true lumen might look like. And you see here that the dissection encroaches on the lumen of the blood of the arteries that supplies the brain, and that could lead to a big stroke. And what makes life probably much more tolerable if the blood pushes hard and induces another tear, and that, as you can see, and that can return, that can resume the blood supply to the brain. And now you could see a big complication, and that's life-threatening complication. If the ascending aorta ruptures, because obviously dissection weakens the wall of the aorta further, and that can lead to the blood going out of the aorta, surrounding the heart, pressing on the heart, preventing it from functioning, and that can kill the patient, and then it can cause sudden death. Once it happens, it takes no time for the patient to die.
So if there's a tear and the blood goes through and makes another tube, and there's another tear at the end of it and the blood comes back to its original tube, that's no problem?
It at least relieves the situation a little bit, but still there is a problem. We could see that there is a false lumen and true lumen and rupture of the aorta. The aorta pops, and then this means immediate death if it happens in the ascending aorta.
And what can we take for our spiritual lives from this?
As I mentioned, for aortic dissection to happen, there is usually an underlying weakness in the aortic wall, be it atherosclerosis or, as I mentioned, a big word called Marfan syndrome. It's basically a disease that people are born with, and it affects the structure of the aortic wall, and it makes it weak and vulnerable to get tears. And obviously high blood pressure does not help, because high blood pressure can in itself induce a tear in the aorta, which means if we take that into the spiritual life, that Satan, once he finds a point of weakness, he would attack vigorously and he would devour the person. He has no mercy. Satan has no mercy. You could see aortic dissection is one of the nastiest diseases that we see in our practice. And Satan does the same. He devours. He really shows no mercy.
When you said he devours, it says the same thing in St. Peter described it in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7 to 9. It says, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour."
Absolutely, and there are many examples that show us how Satan works on a point of weakness and use it to devour the person. Can you mention one?
I have actually here Judas Iscariot. Satan found the weakness that he had a love for money, and he worked through that to give him the idea to sell Jesus for 30 silver coins. And then Satan didn't give him anything after that. What Satan did to him led him into despair, and despair led him into suicide. And if you follow Satan, he's never going to give you anything.
Absolutely. Satan does not reward you for obeying or following him. He devours you, he kills you in the end, and he doesn't care the least about you. I see another example, Saul the king. Saul the king, he was appointed by God to be the king, the first king of Israel. But his point of weakness was his ego. He had a big ego, and he did not follow the commands of God to destroy the Amalekites to the end. He did not follow the commandments. And when Samuel, the prophet, told him that he is rejected by God as a king, all what he cared about is to ask Samuel to come with him to worship, so he will look good in the eyes of the elders of Israel. So the Spirit of God departed from Saul, and guess what? A distressing spirit came into Saul, and Saul, after being the king appointed by God, he became a different man. Satan devoured him. His ego led him to be very jealous of David, and he chased David. He wanted to kill him in all the possible ways. And not only that, when he found out that David passed by a place where the priests were, he thought that the priests conspired with David against Saul the king, and he killed in one day 85 priests. He became a very evil and wicked man. And guess what? He was defeated by the Philistines and ended up again killing himself.
So he got nothing either.
He got nothing either. And that confirms the idea that Satan does not reward people who follow him. On the contrary, he kills them, he devours them, and he rips through.
Are there any more examples that we can think of?
I see a very good example. That is Rehoboam, the king. He is the son of Solomon. After Solomon died, the people came to Rehoboam and asked him to ease the yoke his dad put on them. He was young, he had a big ego too, and he went and asked the elders, and they told him, you have to listen to your people and tell them that you will be their servant. If you show them that you are their servant, they will be servants to you forever. But his ego was big. He asked his young friends, what do you think I should do? They told him, well, you tell them that I will increase the yoke my dad put on you, and if my dad chastised you with whips, I will chastise you with scourges. Guess what? That was a real example of ripping through, and real example of a big tear. A big tear happened in the kingdom of Israel.
It literally ripped them apart.
Ripped them apart,
yeah.
And became the kingdom of Israel and Judah.
Yeah.
There is another example which is probably more cheerful. People, even though they were devoured by Satan, somebody pulled them out of his teeth. And that is the story of Paisa. Paisa was a very good young lady who really lost her parents, and she spent all the money she had to look after the poor, and she opened her house to the poor, to the needy people, and she really had a very good beginning. However, when she ran out of money, her point of weakness is she had a bad company, and these people persuaded her to transform her house into a place for prostitution. And after being a great lady, she became just a prostitute. And however, the monks of the desert, they sent Father John the Short to go and visit her, and he managed, with the prayers of all the monks in the desert, to pull her out of the teeth of the devil. So I just wanted to mention that in the end, because there is always hope, even though
of course
Satan devours and rips through, but still you can come out safely.
So always remember the verse of the day, which is 1 Peter 5, 7, and 9, which it says, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And we'll see you next time on From Heart to Heart.